Not only is there the opportunity for history to be made in the UFC 322 main event, but history is already being made in the UFC 322 co-main event, as for the first time ever, we will see the number 1 and number 2 ranked women's pound-for-pound fighters in the world scoring off against one another. Oh, and by the way, a flyweight championship belt is also on the line. And this historic women's mixed martial arts bout will be taking place between Valentina Shevchenko, the reigning defending 2-time flyweight champion, and the former strawweight 2-time queen, moving up to 125 pounds to achieve greatness, Zhang Weili. Since the introduction of women's mixed martial arts to the Ultimate Fighting Championship back in 2013, there have been some monumental bouts. That includes the first female UFC fight ever between Ronda Rousey and Liz Carmouche, where Ronda Rousey would defeat Liz Carmouche and begin her reign as the UFC Women's Bantamweight Champion. We would see Ronda Rousey compete against Holly Holm at UFC 193 in 2015, which at that point was the most attended UFC event ever, with 56,000 people filling a stadium in Melbourne, Australia. And not only from an attendance perspective was it one of the most monumental women's fights ever, but it was also the night where Holly Holm would end the reign of Ronda Rousey and essentially end her mixed martial arts career with one of the biggest upsets of all time. In 2018, we would see two massive women's fights. Firstly, Cris Cyborg versus Amanda Nunes. At that point, if you would have asked a majority of the MMA community, Cris Cyborg would have been regarded as the greatest female mixed martial artist of all time, and that entire discussion was turned on its head that night after Amanda Nunes would not only defeat Cris Cyborg, but knock her out in less than a minute. And 3 weeks prior to that bout, on December 8th of 2018, we would see Valentina Shevchenko versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk for the inaugural Women's Flyweight Championship in the UFC, and they would go back and forth for 25 minutes before Valentina would solidify herself as the flyweight queen, and still to this day is regarded as the greatest women's flyweight of all time. And on March 7th of 2020 at UFC 248, a fight that is honored on the wall behind me, we would see Joanna Jędrzejczyk and Zhang Weili compete in a fight where, heading into, wasn't necessarily labeled as one of the biggest women's fights of all time, but in the aftermath is credited as being the greatest women's mixed martial arts bout ever in a top 5 UFC fight in its history as well, regardless of gender. Joanna Jędrzejczyk, one of the greatest female competitors in mixed martial arts history, and Zhang Weili at that night would solidify herself in the same exact category, and since then has gone on to do incredible things. And now we will see both of them, Valentina Shevchenko and Zhang Weili, two women that have been involved in some very big women's fights throughout the sport's history, now clashing against one another in a fight that, dare I say, is the biggest women's fight ever from a legacy perspective in mixed martial arts history. Combined, these two women have 4 championship reigns and 12 title defenses between the two. For Valentina Shevchenko, she became the inaugural women's flyweight champion and would defend the title 7 consecutive times in her first reign before being upset by Alexa Grasso in March of 2023, one of the greatest upsets in women's MMA history. She would then win her title back from Alexa Grasso in their third bout in September of 2024 and has gone on to defend her title one more time, the first of her second reign, and that was back in May at UFC 315 against Manon Fior, which she would win a 25-minute decision. And for Zhang Weili, it took just 3 UFC bouts for her to earn a UFC title opportunity, and she would seize it by knocking out Jessica Andrade in less than a minute in her home country of China to become the first ever Chinese UFC champion. She would then defend her title against Joanna Jędrzejczyk in that all-time bout that I previously discussed, before losing her belt to Rose Namajunas. But she would capture the strawweight belt back for the second time in November of 2022, and since then has gone on to defend her title 3 more times for 4 total over her 2 reigns. And much like Islam Makhachev in the main event, Zhang Weili has vacated her championship for an opportunity to chase greatness and become a 2-weight world champion, and she will have the opportunity to do so by taking on one of the greatest female mixed martial artists of all time, a battle of number 1 versus number 2 pound for pound. It doesn't get bigger and it doesn't get better than this. This is truly a women's super fight, and just a super fight in general, that MMA diehard fans like myself have been clamoring for and asking for years, and now the fight week has finally arrived. For the champion Valentina Shevchenko, the only other losses in her UFC career are to the same woman, and that is Amanda Nunes, both of them coming up at 135 pounds, and one of the two coming in a championship opportunity at 135 as well. But it's pretty evident that Valentina never truly belonged at 135 pounds, and that is why 125 has suited her so well, and she is acknowledged as the greatest women's flyweight fighter of all time, and has beaten Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Jessica Eye, Liz Carmouche, Caitlin Sermonara, formerly Caitlin Chukagian, Jennifer Maia, Jessica Andrade, Lauren Murphy, Talia Santos, Alexa Grasso, and now Manon Fior as of May. Not to mention her 3 wins at bantamweight: Sarah Kaufman, Holly Holm, and Juliana Pena, 2 of the 3 former bantamweight champions. So all in all, since debuting at flyweight back in 2018, Valentina Shevchenko is 11-1-1 at 125 pounds, with 10 of those 11 victories coming in championship bouts. And for Zhang Weili, she is 10-2 in the UFC, all 12 of her fights thus far taking place in the strawweight division of 115 pounds, with the only 2 losses being against the same woman. Do you see the comparisons and similarities between these two? Except for Zhang, it was against Rose Namajunas in back-to-back championship bouts. But if your name isn't Rose Namajunas, that means you likely haven't found much success at all against Zhang Weili, as she has victories over Tisha Pennington, Jessica Andrade, 2 wins over Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Carla Esparza, Amanda Lemos, Tatiana Suarez, and Yan Xiaonan. And from a skill set perspective, these are 2 of the most elite level women's mixed martial artists that we have ever seen, because they truly can get the job done in all facets of the fight game. When Valentina Shevchenko made her UFC debut in December of 2015, she was known for her Muay Thai and kickboxing accomplishments from her past that even included victories over someone like a Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and she also holds one of the coldest fight picks that I've ever seen as well. But it became pretty evident pretty early on in her UFC career that she doesn't just have to keep the fight standing to find success, because she picked up a submission win via armbar against Juliana Pena back in 2017 and has only gotten better on the canvas since then. As a matter of fact, for someone that was known for their kickboxing and Muay Thai skills heading into the UFC, Valentina Shevchenko in her 18 UFC bouts has had 1 or more takedowns in 17 of them, and 2 or more in 15 out of those 17. And as the years have gone on and the fights have stacked up, and the age has also started to play a factor for Valentina's career, she has only committed more and more to that part of her skill set and game and evolved it. And while her opponent Zhang Weili wasn't necessarily known for her high-level kickboxing and Muay Thai skills heading into her own UFC career, it became pretty evident pretty quickly that Zhang Weili was a fast-paced, all-action fighter, having only ever been outstruck in 2 of her 12 UFC bouts. But similarly to Valentina Shevchenko, Zhang Weili has grown in the grappling and wrestling side of things in her UFC career as well, and has had 1 takedown or more in 9 of her 12 bouts, and over the course of her last 3 championship defenses has 13 takedowns. But that's not to say that neither of these 2 women can't still get the job done on the feet. As a matter of fact, that's what I'm anticipating this fight to be more often than not. I don't think that the grappling will play as big of a factor in this fight as we have maybe been led on to believe due to the past few performances and years of Valentina and Zhang Weili respectively. I think that these 2 are going to have so much respect for one another and want to make all of the right decisions and minimize their mistakes that they may fall back to their bread and butter in the striking realm to attempt to achieve the most success possible. And I think that Zhang Weili is going to want to look to make Valentina Shevchenko uncomfortable, kind of how Alexa Grasso did when she pulled off the upset a couple of years ago. Because if Zhang Weili tries to just have a straight up back and forth kickboxing fight, specifically at range against Valentina, she will lose. But if she makes it dirty, if she makes it scrappy, like she did against Joanna Jędrzejczyk in their all-time fight, Joanna, by the way, holds very similar skills to Valentina Shevchenko, coming into the UFC with a vast majority of experience in kickboxing and Muay Thai. And could I be wrong? Could there be takedowns in this fight? Of course there can be, but I don't think that it's going to be an overwhelming amount of time over the course of the 25-minute or less bout that we see. I think we are going to see Valentina Shevchenko look to keep this fight at range, control the pace of the fight at a relative lower volume, while Zhang Weili will look to press forward, close the distance, and make it a dogfight phone booth war. Something that we don't see Valentina Shevchenko get involved with much at all. And that makes me insanely intrigued intrigued to see how this fight will play out over the course of the 5 rounds. And we will get to bear witness to who the greatest female fighter is present day in the UFC. And one of these two will even continue to solidify themselves up the ladder in terms of GOAT status, following behind Amanda Nunes. I hope this fight gets the respect that it deserves, because it is truly one of a kind for women's mixed martial arts, something that we have never seen before. Number 1 versus number 2 pound for pound, a championship on the line, Valentina looking to successfully defend her title for the 9th time total and 2nd consecutive in her 2nd reign, and Zhang Weili attempting to become a 2-weight world champion and start this next portion of her career at 125 pounds. So I want to get all of your thoughts and your predictions for this scrap down in the comments below. Who do you think is going to come out as the flyweight queen? Give me your predictions, give me your bets, and everything in between. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new, because we are on the road to reaching 1,000 subscribers, and the goal is to hit that milestone before the end of the year, so any and all support is greatly appreciated. And not only do I break down and preview the biggest and best fights and storylines heading into each card, but I also recap the most meaningful results in the aftermath and give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. You can also join the discussion on social media at Verbal Spar MMA on X, Instagram, and TikTok, as well as like the Facebook page Verbal Sparring MMA, and you can follow on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple, where every Monday and Friday podcast episodes release there. Have a great weekend, enjoy this insane fight card, and I will see you all in the next video.